Well, good morning. Welcome to week 4. Thanks everybody for a great start and great chat again this morning. You guys can hear me? Yeah, only 3 of us. Hopefully more will join. I know sometimes people have scheduling conflicts. We teachers work to avoid that, but sometimes, or maybe people are just too cold and didn't get out of bed. So thanks, you guys. I appreciate it. You guys can hear me okay, right? Yes. Thumbs up. Awesome. Thank you very much. So everybody's okay so far heading into week 4, correct? Okay. Awesome. Thank you, Sammy. Everybody's off to a good start. You're kind of feeling the rhythm. You're seeing how this class works, that kind of thing. No? What do you need help with, Loki? Or you can't hear me? Which one? Let's see. Let's see if I can get that. Oh, okay. It's just my last week. Your last week was weird. Okay, you want to message me on that? You want to email me, ask me about that, or do you want to share it out here? Either way, your choice. I'm not remembering anything specific about anything that would have been weird. It was that decision making. So if you want to share anything here, feel free. Otherwise, you can email me and I'll be glad to help you. And that's an option for both everybody. Oh, your classes were weird. Okay. I have no idea why. Don't know why. This week we're heading into week 4. Does anybody know anything about week 4 at eAchieve? Good reminder. It's week 4. Okay, I'm sorry about that. That happens to anybody, Loki, just right back at it this week, and it's a new week. Yeah, so don't let it get you down, Loki. Just keep going. Yes, progress reports. So on Friday at midnight, that's your cutoff. Although sometimes, depending on when I get grading done, I might be a little lenient on that. But technically, your deadline is Friday at midnight for this class. Some teachers will cut it off at 3 o'clock or a different time on Friday so that they can get at the grading. My classes, I go till midnight for you to turn things in to be counted for the progress report. So this week, week 4, everything that's due will need to be turned in by midnight on Friday, and then I will be calculating the progress reports, updating your learning targets, that kind of thing, for those to be mailed out. They get mailed out a few days later by eAchieve. So you want to make sure you're looking at my grades. You want to make sure that you have no NEEs or INCs. NEE, yeah, you'll be fine, I think. Just make sure you're at it this week. Look at my grades so that you know, because anything you get in before Friday, your teachers will count. So make sure if you have anything NEE in my class, it will mean that you, and I don't specifically mean you guys that are here today, but perhaps somebody who's listening, it might mean that it would mean that it was in a format I could not open. So either somebody did a Google link or somebody did a different app that I can't open. So remember that week 1 practice exercise was really all about knowing how to submit in this class. So it gave me a good introduction to you guys, and it was a good first touch point for us. However, that's really the main goal, was that you know how to submit in this class. So everything has to be saved as a PDF and attached to the assignment as a download. So if you've got an NEE, that's what that's going to mean. If you have an INC, it means that you didn't pass the assessment. So that would mean you need to look at my comments and revise and resubmit. I think every summative is set up to give you at least one more attempt. If you need more than that, you need to email me and I'll turn on another attempt. Okay, so just make sure you're up to date and make sure you don't have any NEEs or INCs, and you'll be golden. If you're working for higher grades, again, watch that feedback and or if I didn't put any, if you've got a proficient, if you're going for advanced, if I didn't put anything on there, just let me know that your person going for advanced, and then I'll make sure that I include that, and I'll give you some to help you on the ones that you've already turned in. Okay, you can always revise and resubmit at eAchieve all the way through to the end. Okay, so let's head into week 4, which is about managing credit. So we're going to talk about saving. We're going to talk about the difference between debit and credit. We're going to go over establishing credit. Every young person needs to do this. It's not something that is automatic. It's something you have to work at and take care of. And then how about how to maintain your credit? So you may know some grown-ups who didn't do that. So we're going to look at that, and then we'll talk about our week at a glance. Okay, so here's a quote by Charles A. Jaffe. And tell me in the chat, what do you think it means? What do you think this means? It's not your salary that makes you rich, it's your spending habits. What do you think that means? You guys are in high school. You've heard lots of things already about people's managing money. You know the things that go on in your own household. You've been able to overhear. You know about different family members, people on the news, even our country. Pandemic has complicated lots of people's finances. So what do you think that it means that it's your spending habits that make you rich instead of how much money you bring in? Any ideas on this? So what do you think? You guys are quiet, or you just stumped? So there are some people that literally, if their salary goes up, their spending goes up, right? They kind of match it. Or if people overspend, like spend more than they bring in, no matter what that amount their salary is, if they spend more than they bring in, are they going to feel like they are stable, or will they ever feel like they are rich? And by rich, definition of rich could be different, just being satisfied, or if somebody literally thinks they have to have a bank account. So no ideas? Okay, well, let's see if we head into this topic, and then you'll have, yeah, you know what, Alexis, I think that really sums it up well. Yeah, think about your spending. One of the best quotes I ever heard about spending, I love this, I latched onto it. Yeah, it goes like this. I can admire something without having to acquire something. I love that. So you can take a look at it, you can admire it, right? But you don't have to have it. So that's a really good way to frame your thoughts about a thing, right? So even in decision making, I know one person in particular, when they got to the end about decision making, really that was their closing statement, and I loved that. It was that they wouldn't waste their money on a bunch of things that they really didn't need, and that was their conclusion in the using the decision making process. So super important. That applies. That decision making process that we learned about last week applies to this, and really any topic that we talk about in this class. So how about this? Do you feel like you're a spender or a saver? Which one are you guys? Usually people will land at one of the two. Both can be addictive. Saver, okay. So yeah, when I was young, I was a saver too. So isn't it great to see that number grow and to do that? Good, awesome. And sometimes people will go back and forth, and sometimes life will dictate that people have to spend. But usually people will land at one of the two, either they're a spender or a saver. So good. So we're going to talk a little bit about that this week. So here's some great quotes by Warren Buffett. Do you know, guys, have you heard of Warren Buffett? Is his name familiar to you? Yeah, okay. And you want to say what he's known for, Loki? What is his reputation? He's known as So yeah, people have just studied him because he has lots of good principles that have helped him. Yeah, okay, fair enough. They've helped him to make money. So he's been successful in that way. So a lot of people will study him, will learn from him. So these are some things that he's said. You notice it says on earning, on spending, on saving, on taking risk, on investment, and on expectations. So any of those quotes resonate with you? On earning, never depend on a single income, make investment. So he's talking about making investment rather than just being a person who earns money. You've got to do something to invest. That can even be a retirement fund, that kind of thing. On spending, if you buy things you don't need, soon you'll have to sell things that you do need. Yikes, right? On saving, don't save what's left after spending, but spend what's left after saving. On risk taking, never test the depth of the river with both feet. So you don't risk everything, right? You risk a little, see how it's going to go. On investment, don't put all your eggs in one basket. So diversify, right? So do some of this, some of that in case you lose it, in case your investment were lost. On expectations, honesty is a very expensive gift. Do not expect it from cheap people. So any of these resonate with you guys? A lot of these are, for grown-ups and when they do have the ability to do more with their money. So these are some of there are different people. Anybody else have somebody that you guys know that you look up to or that you refer to for managing money? I know somebody that is pretty famous that a lot of people look toward. Any names? Anybody heard of Dave Ramsey? Anybody heard of him, Dave Ramsey? So he's also famous. He went bankrupt at one time in his life, and he learned a lot of principles and came out of debt. You haven't heard of him? A lot of people look to him for for financial advice. So even a lot of young people have referenced him in previous times that I've taught life skills. I just made myself a note. I'll add him to the presentation going forward. So let's talk about saving money first. Why do people save money? You guys, lots of you said you're saving. What are you saving money for? Just saving to save, or do you have a goal? We talked about goal setting. Anybody have goals? Anything that you're saving money for? Right now, most of you have the luxury of having people that pay for your housing, your utilities, your transportation, your food, that kind of thing. All right, so you've even got a certain kind of car, future needs. Okay, good. Computer, good. So you do have goals, right? So you're saving money. That's very, very good. So a lot of people, as we go into this week, a lot of people won't save. They'll try to get something in a different way. Any ideas of how somebody could get something without saving money first? Saving money is the way people used to always have to get something. They would have to save up and get it. You probably read books about that. How do people get things now without having the money saved? Any ideas? How might somebody go out and buy a computer? Or how might somebody, yes, credit. So that's something that we're going to talk about today as well. Very good, Loki. Yeah, so really, really important. A lot of people that are responsible or want to be responsible are looking for other people that are responsible as well. And that finding a job and saving for a house of your own, that's very attractive to somebody else, somebody that knows to do that and is looking forward and thinking about the future. Very attractive. So with money, that's a thing that we need to do. Even now, with the pandemic, a lot of people were caught unaware with something of this magnitude happening and hitting so many different people. So there are principles that people are really recommend following so that if something does happen, you have a cushion, right? You have something put aside that can help you get through if somebody were to get sick or lose a job or have something else happen, some other kind of event. Like Dave Ramsey recommends people have an emergency fund, and that would be like 3 to 6 months of income. He says start with just having $1,000. He talks about people getting $1,000 in the bank, and then working on other financial goals. And one of them would be having saved 3 to 6 months of income, so that if anything happened, you've got that. A lot of people save money for future wants and needs, things like a vacation, or a new bike, a new car, going to college, that kind of thing, a wedding. Very, very much so. People save for things like that. And then sometimes people will save so that they can just treat themselves. Although I think of a vacation and those kinds of things as treating yourself too. So that's why people save money. And then, so let's talk about that credit, and we'll talk about credit versus debit. Do you guys know the difference between debit and credit? So let's talk about like a debit card. Both of these might have, let's use the company Visa. So you might see a Visa card, 2 Visa cards. One is a debit card, one is a debit card, one is a credit card. Do you know the difference between a debit card and a credit card? Anybody know? Anybody have a debit card? It's usually the first thing that people get when they're starting out as a young person, or they're starting to build and learn about money. Exactly right, Sammy. Yep, a debit means literally on the ledger, it comes out. So if you have a debit card, it's usually attached to a checking account, could be attached to a savings account. And when you use that debit card, it literally debits your account, meaning it subtracts your checking account right there. So whatever money you had in the account, you now have that much less. So that's a debit card. What is a credit card? Who knows what a credit card is? Does it come up right out of your checking account? Does it? So if I pay for something with a credit card, does it subtract out of my bank account? What do you think? Yeah, exactly right, Sammy. So a credit card means that a company has extended you credit. So it means, yep, line of credit, very good. And then you pay it back, and sometimes with interest. And a lot of people pay for the interest part of it. And that means that they didn't pay everything back when it was first due, when the total came in. So people can get in trouble with credit cards if they're not using if they're not managing them, or if they're not watching their spending, or they're not paying them back monthly, okay, when the bill comes in. So we're going to talk about it more, but let's see if you know these, true or false, now that you know the difference between debit and credit. Number 1, I do not have to pay back money to a company if I use a debit card. I do not have to pay back money to a company if I use a debit card. True or false? True, exactly right, because it came right out of your bank. So there's no paying anything back, because when you paid, it came out of your bank account. You paid for it. So it's paid. There's no paying anything back. You already paid for it. So very good. Number 2, there's a difference between good credit and bad credit. True or false? Very much so. Very much so. Yes, very big difference. So good credit, yeah, that means that people are paying their bills on time. It means that they have an income. It means they're managing their money. Bad credit means that people have a lot of debt, or they're not paying on time. So very big difference. Number 3, debit and credit cards work the same way. I just swipe the card and it's paid for. Everybody should get this one correct. Do they work the same way? Debit cards and credit cards. Do they work the same way? Yeah. Okay. So I think I can see where you're thinking, Sammy. In a way, you feel like you paid for it, but really you didn't. You just put the amount onto a ledger, and then you're going to have to pay for it later. So I think I can see how you could say true on that one, Sammy. But technically they're different, because a debit card, you literally have paid for it. It was subtracted from your account, and so done and paid for. A credit card puts that number onto an account, and then you will get a statement, and so you still owe it. So hopefully, is that clear for everybody? Okay, and then the fourth one, awesome, thank you, Sammy. And then the fourth one, if I miss a payment on a credit card, that's okay. I'll just wait for the next cycle to pay, or the next statement. What about that one, true or false? Is it okay to miss a payment on a credit card? Some of these can be kind of tricky because this is a little bit premature. You guys probably don't have them. Yeah, so it is not okay. That will hurt your credit, and that relates to number 2 up there, where somebody can end up with bad credit. Okay, so here we go. We'll talk about the differences. Is there really a difference? There sure is. Okay, so debit cards. Anybody have one here? Anybody have a checking account card with a debit card attached to it? I don't know what ages you guys are. I know you're in high school. So you're talking about credit, right, Loki? I'm talking about debit card. Anybody have a credit card? No problem. I'm sorry. Yep. Also, the system takes a little bit. Anybody have one? Okay. Do you guys have a checking account? Anybody have a checking account? No? Okay. So you do, Alexis. Do you have a debit card, Alexis? Not currently. Okay. So what you guys are showing is that this is very common, very normal. You use cash. Okay. So very common. As you get, when you're under your parents, they're helping you learn to manage your money. Does anybody feel like in your family you guys talk about money? You talk about managing money? Do you guys talk about how your parents or your guardians manage money? Does anybody have those conversations at your house? Barely, yeah. So a lot of people are real quiet about money, but it's really important to learn about it, because it really affects your entire life. It affects other people. Okay, savings account. So yeah, so even Mason, he's 4. So I've opened him up a savings account. That'll usually be the first step. Do you guys all have savings accounts? Is that something y'all have? When I was young, everybody got a savings account, and that's not so true anymore. And all of these things are dependent on your parents. These are not any kind of judgment on you, your families, or anything like that. Anybody else have a savings account? It's a great first place. How about a piggy bank? Do you guys have a piggy bank? Anybody have a piggy bank? Yeah, okay, so really that can be the very first thing that you learn about managing money, right? And your college savings account, that's awesome too. So that's a savings account, great. Any of you ever get money and then go out as a young child and just blow your money, spend it all at once? Have you ever experienced that? It's one of the lessons we learn about money. Anybody want to share out an experience they had with money? Like you got money for your birthday in a card, you saved your money for what you wanted. That's awesome. Was that hard to do, Loki, or was there some satisfaction in that? And do you want to share out what you bought? Or maybe how old you were? You don't have to, but I don't want to put you on the spot too much, but if you don't mind sharing, that'd be pretty interesting. I remember, having money and blowing it, and then, later thinking, now I have no money. and reflecting back on, was that worth what I paid? Anybody had that experience? Wow, that's really good. So that's an important concept, Loki, for children to learn what's called delayed gratification. We're not feeling like you need something right now, an electric scooter. Okay, did you think it was worth it? Was it worth a year and a half of savings to get it? Yeah, okay, so good. So you learned a lot doing that, didn't you, in that process? So these are some of the things that is really important for children to learn. Okay, so back to the debit card. Many times, okay, awesome. You'd still use it, so it was worth it. So debit means that it's taking it right out of your account. So as you get older and in high school, and especially if you have a job, you'll need a checking account. How many of you have a job where you earn a paycheck? Anybody? Yeah, so Alexis, that's really, really important lesson to learn when you're young. Okay, so Alexis, you have a job. Anybody else have a job where you get a paycheck in? These days, most employers will want to do what they call direct deposit. So they'll want a checking account number so that they can deposit your paycheck right in to your account. So that was prevalent even before COVID. Now, so many things have switched over electronic just because of the virus. So they want to direct deposit into your account, and then you'll either have checks and or a debit card to be able to make purchases, okay? So either way, if you use a check or a debit card, it means that in your account, it subtracts it out, okay? So the card is used like cash, okay? So once you spend it, it's gone. You don't need to pay that amount back to the bank or a company because it was your money. So you took your money, you paid for your money, okay? Does that make sense? So everybody make sense? A debit means it's a subtraction, okay? Anybody take business classes here? Anybody have Mr. Burden for business classes yet? Things like accounting. These are really accounting concepts. Has anybody taken business courses? You guys learned from me, if you recall, that I have a business minor, so I really enjoy learning about business and these kinds of things, finances. Well, you know, really important. So if you think about your schedule going forward in your electives, it really helps you frame money going in, money coming out kind of thing. Just a basic accounting class will help you. And then credit is different, as we mentioned. So credit is when a company or a bank issues a card and it has a line of credit. And so when you buy something, they are tabulating, they're doing addition, right? Instead of subtraction over here, they're adding up what you owe. And then you will get a statement at the end of the billing cycle. So it's not necessarily the first of the month to the end of the last day of the month. There'll be a billing cycle. Oftentimes it's within the month. And so then when a person gets that statement with the total, if they pay it off in full, they are not charged any interest. Okay, so it's the exact same number. If they don't pay off the full amount, they are charged interest, and sometimes it can be very high. And so it can mean that they bought something for one price that went on their credit card, but when they finally pay it off, they will have paid a higher amount. Does that make sense? So one reason people might use credit is a credit score is important. So Loki, you mentioned buying a house. So people can't buy a house without having, unless they have all the cash, they will need a loan. And so they need to have a credit score and a good credit rating to be able to have a bank or a lender lend them the money. Okay, does that make sense? So if somebody only works in cash or debit cards, and then let's say they want to go out and buy a house, they have no way to show that they are good at handling their money, right, when they owe. So that's why it's an important part of it. Even buying a car, if somebody needs a loan, same kind of thing. And so these credit cards can be used to help improve this credit score. The other thing about credit cards is a lot of times they have perks. So sometimes they will give you cash back, or they might have you guys heard of miles cards, credit cards that have miles? So that's one that I have where, I pay it off every month, but then I earn airline miles. So I'm trying to fly somewhere for free, right? And so their goal is to have you not, their goal is to make money off of the interest that they charge you and others. And that's how they are able to give rewards like that. But if somebody pays it off in full, then they don't have to pay interest. Okay. So let's talk about how to establish credit. So all of you said, and very uncommon for high school people to have credit, but you need to establish it heading into adulthood, but you got to be really careful. So opening a checking and savings accounts are a very important first step. Okay. And then that's a way that you have money, you're paying for things, you're accounting, you're doing the math, that kind of thing. If you are trying to get a credit card or want to establish your credit, there's something called a layaway plan that you can use. Has anybody heard of a layaway plan? Anybody know what that is? They used to be more common than they are now, but a lot of people still will use them at holiday time. Anybody heard of a layaway plan? So there are some stores that will allow people to go through the store and shop. A lot of people, like I said, do this a lot of families will do this at holiday time. So let's say they're shopping and they don't want all the toys at Christmas time to be gone, things that they want for their kids, but they can't pay for them right then. And so they might pick those things out of the store, and then they go back to the customer service area and they will say that they'd like to put them on layaway. And so the company will tally those up. The person at the counter will tally up how much everything costs, and then the person will pay installments, and when they're paid off, then they will hand them all of the merchandise. Does that make sense? So let's say somebody got $400 worth of toys for their kids in a cart, and they took it back to the service counter. They would tally it up, including the tax, and then the person would pay like $100 four times, including the tax, and then they'd be able to take those home. So they try to pay it off before Christmas. Okay, does that thumbs up if that makes sense? That's called a layaway plan, and that's a form of credit, even though they don't hand off the products until it's fully paid. Okay, awesome. Another way to establish credit is making a big down payment on your first credit purchase. So what might be somebody's first credit purchase? So you guys have already mentioned it, but what might be somebody's first credit purchase? Think of yourselves. What might be something that you would buy on credit for the first time? Or maybe you've seen somebody else buy something for the first time. What do you think? What's something that somebody might buy on credit for the first time? A car is a great example. Yes, I think so many people have bought a car as their first credit purchase. So if somebody saves for a big down payment and they go into the dealership and they want to get credit, they are very likely to be granted that credit on their first purchase because they've shown that they've saved up money and they're paying a substantial part of the car. And so in a way, it's security for the person who's given out credit. Does that make sense? Thumbs up if that makes sense. So if any of you want to establish credit, some people will even do this if they've saved up the money for their entire car, and then they go in and put a down payment down, and then they have the money to make the payments, and they feel better about that, especially if they're used to having something, paying for something cash. And then, they don't have to worry that anything's going to happen. They'll be able to pay that off, okay? Or even they can pay it off early. Start with one credit card. Many local department stores are a little more lenient on granting somebody a credit card. So Kohl's is a great example. Target is another one. So somebody could, if they had a job, they have a checking account, they have a permanent address, that kind of thing, they're likely to be able to get that first credit card, and then they've got to be responsible for it. And another option is to have a relative co-sign. That means that somebody would vouch for you, and the company could hold them responsible if a person didn't pay off the balance. That's called co-signing. So it's a way of vouching for somebody. Okay. So some pros and cons of credit, and this really has to do with your summative this week. And so use your textbook. We're talking about a few of them here, but use your textbook. Always go into your textbook. I give you some good information every week, but your textbook is really you're a great source. And again, these are life skills. These are principles that will carry you through and help you to be more successful, more responsible your whole life. So this week is no exception. So credit cards are very convenient. You don't need to carry a lot of cash. So people feel more safe about that. If you lose your cash, right, it's gone. Somebody can buy an expensive product and then they can pay for it as they go. And then, like I mentioned, a lot of credit cards have perks to them. Okay, so like I have one that if I use it, it'll give me like rewards to a store. So I literally can go in. I just did this recently where I went in and I had like $95 at a clothing store, and I took my daughter and we bought stuff on sale and we had fun with it. And we paid a few dollars extra, but it was just because I used a credit card and I paid it off. So it's pretty good perk with that. Okay, so you just don't want to get in trouble with your credit cards by not paying them off. Conversely, if I didn't pay them off, I would have interest bills every month, and they would give me these rewards, but the interest would exceed what they give me as rewards. But it's part of why they do it, to kind of lure people in. So you have to be really smart. A con is it can be too easy to spend money. You just swipe it and you're not keeping track of the total, how much you're going to owe. People can overspend. And really, like we talked about that quiz, you don't own the product, the item, until it's paid off in full. You really don't. And there are some forms of credit where they can come and repossess or take back what you bought if you didn't pay it in full. So that's a little scary, right? Have you heard of that? There used to be a show, like a repo show, where they called it for short, repossession. So it's where the creditor isn't paid in full and they take that item back and they want to be paid. Okay. So how to maintain credit. Any questions as you're going here? Anything that you're thinking? Anything you want to add as we go? No? Okay. Is this lots of this new to you guys? I know it would have been to me in high school. Very much so. Yeah. All right. And it's why you learn, Steve, you can learn about it ahead of time. The goal is that you don't make these mistakes that lots of people have fallen into. Remember, it impacts not only you, but it impacts the people around you and even those businesses, right? If people don't pay them back, that affects people. It affects jobs. It affects the company. Will the company make it? That kind of thing. And even your character, right? And of course, your credit rating. So really important to think about these things and what you're going to do. Okay, so how to maintain credit. Keep tabs of your credit rating. So there are things like Credit Karma and different apps, and lots of banks and credit cards also will give that option where somebody can monitor their credit rating, their credit score. You have to be careful of identity theft. You guys have heard of that? Thumbs up if you've heard of identity theft. So it's when somebody will take somebody's personal information, like their name, address, social security number. Yeah, and then they'll get credit on somebody else's. They will apply for credit and they buy things with no intention of paying. So that's called identity theft. It's a crime. It's very serious and it really hurts people. Don't overspend. Be really careful. So I know that when I hear speeches about money and talks about money, they always say that this is one of the things that couples fight about the most, or that people fight about the most. It did. Oh my goodness, what a nightmare, Loki. I'm sure you agree. I'm sure you agree that your mom had a nightmare over that. Very difficult for people. So a lot of people fight over money. So really important to set a good foundation for how you handle money going forward, not only for yourself, but also for those relationships you may have in the future. Make sure you're reading your statement carefully. Sometimes things will be double charged. Sometimes there'll just be errors. So make sure you're reading it. Be mindful of the charges and interest. So if somebody's late, not only do they get charged interest, but they get a late charge, and those can be really, really steep. So you want to avoid those. And then pay your bills on the time. So even make sure you pay at least the minimum. Hopefully you're paying everything off and you're keeping track of that. And then know that a third of your credit score is based on your payment history. So you want to make sure that you're paying on time. They really knock somebody's credit score. And credit score is what you use to get more credit, or if you need to buy a house, that kind of thing. So using credit wisely, make sure you're staying within your credit limits. When somebody is given credit, they're given an amount. So if they try, a lot of times a transaction would be denied if they go over the credit limit, but sometimes they will grant it, and sometimes there are penalties for that. They might charge somebody a big fee if they go over the credit limit. So make sure you're staying within those. And then shop for the best credit terms. Credit cards have different interest rates. Some of them are sky high. Some of them are like 28%, if you can imagine. And people can end up paying, paying for something for years and years. So really think about that. And then, so some credit cards have better interest rates than others, and better perks, that kind of thing. Read all your agreements before you sign. You really do have to read the fine print. You need to know what it says. They are not going to change because you didn't know it and you didn't understand it. Literally, when you sign, you're agreeing to every one of their terms. So make sure you're reading those. Keep records. If you have any disagreement, you're going to need a record to be able to prove that there's an error, that something's wrong. So keep your receipts. I just put an envelope, and I put for each, label the year, and I'll tuck my receipts in there. And if something breaks, or if I need to pull out a receipt for some reason, or if there's a mistake on a statement, then I have those receipts right there. And then after a couple of years, after a certain amount of time will expire, I'll figure I don't need them anymore, and then I can purge them, throw them away. But make sure you're keeping records, and then pay those bills promptly. Don't lose track of your due dates. And so there's usually there'll be a credit application, so they can look different. Here's just a form, like if somebody were to go into a bank, or maybe the type of department store like Kohl's or Target kind of looks simplified. Most of them are online. As I mentioned, virtually everything's online now. But they're going to ask you your name, your address, your birthday, your social security number, your email address. Then they're going to ask things about being employed. So do you think that people would be granted credit if they are not employed? Very, very much. Got to have an income source. And some people do have other income sources. Yeah, so, but in general, somebody would need a job. Most people would need a job. Now, there are some cases where people have different sources of income and they would qualify for credit. So know that as well. But they will generally want to know your job, especially when you're a young person. They're going to want to know your employment information for anybody. But when you're establishing credit, that job piece of it is really important in establishing credit. And then they're going to want to know your bank information, the name of the bank, the account number types, that kind of thing. They want to know if you've ever filed for bankruptcy. They want to know if you have defaulted on payment of credit before. So those kinds of things. And then personal references they may want, depending on the type of credit. But especially when you're just getting your initial credit. So here's a Warren Buffett quote: "Don't save what's left after spending, but spend what is left after saving." So his point is that you make saving a priority, right? And so that Dave Ramsey is, I'll refer to him again. he talks about having an 80-10-10 rule. So a lot of people follow an 80-10-10 rule. Anybody ever heard of that or know what it is? I guess Warren Buffett would say 10-10-80. And that's a little clue. So you would save 10% of what you bring in, and then a lot of people will have a charitable contribution of 10%, and then 80% is what they live off of. Yeah, save until spending. Yeah, so that's pretty much what it means, Loki. Good job. So he's talking about knowing your income, knowing what you're bringing in, and then making that saving a priority. And so you'll cut back on the spending rather than cut back on the saving. Does that make sense? Most people, if they do it the other way around, they're going to spend, and I don't have anything left to save. So Warren Buffett's point is, if you put your savings in first, your spending will be dependent on what you have left after saving. Okay, so it's one of those principles that works for most people. All right, and so here's week 4, week at a glance. You have an article on how to read a credit card agreement, and you'll need this for your assessment. There's a video on how to understand credit card terms and conditions, and again, you need this for the assessment. Chapter 17 is on managing personal finance. I would think everyone would read that. You guys are really interested in this kind of thing, knowing that you're heading into adulthood. There's a quiz over that chapter that is adaptive release again, and then you'll access the summative, which is using credit. And some part of that is multiple choice, and then at the end you have a couple of questions, and make sure you do these two really well. Notice it says discuss. So many times I have students that will just list some things and I never give full credit. This is supposed to be a discussion. So you're including many pros and cons of credit cards, the positives and the negatives, but you're discussing them. You're including a discussion of them, okay? So a list will not get you full credit on that. And remember, this is a summative. It's going to look different than your other summatives, but this should be a good paragraph for this answer. It should be applying what you've learned in this week's lessons materials. And then secondly, your best friend has just applied for their first credit card. They've asked you for advice on how to use it wisely. What advice do you give them? And again, provide some specific details. So again, this is another discussion rather than just a couple of items. So a lot of people really do well on this, and a lot of people kind of treat it like multiple choice questions and give me a little bit, and that's just not going to be a passing grade on that. Okay, so any questions on anything? That's a lot of information. I know a lot of new. I would encourage you to have discussions in your home about money and about what you're learning. Not to pry for other family members, but to learn, to have those discussions, to get some good advice. Okay? Any questions? Thank you so much for being here this week. Do a good job on it. Thank you. Thanks, everybody. Appreciate that very much. Have a great week, you guys.